All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome back. It's been a long time, right? Last time we met was Monday night. Now I know it seems like forever, but okay. But there is a makeup session tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. It's going to be awesome. Afterwards. But getting there will be tricky. But everyone, okay? 7 o'clock a.m. We've got to keep catching up. We're on Nun Amud Aleph. We are at Tanya. Which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 lines down from the top. Tanya, we learned in a brayser. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, "B'nei ma'ayin shenikvu v'lecha sotam ton." If we learned that if intestines got punctured, so then you've got a treifa. If the intestines have some kind of thick liquid of digestion inside of them, if they wind up, if that liquid fills up the hole and seals it, then it's kshera. That's fine, right? As long as it is sealed. My lecha, what is this liquid that comes out there? Amarav Kahana, shirka dimaya. So Rav Kahana says that it is the digestive juices or whatever they have inside the thick slime that's inside of the intestines. Dinofik avgav duchka, it gets pushed out by pressure. And so therefore, right, it's not going to come, once it gets into that hole, it doesn't come out unless you cut it out with a knife. It's in there. So therefore, that's going to seal it up.
No pressure, by the way.
This is pressure. Gemire chavraya de Rabbi Abba me Rabbi Abba. So the friends, the colleagues of Rabbi Abba had learned from Rabbi Abba, Umanu, who were these colleagues, Rabbi Zera. V'amrila, but some had the tradition that it was Chavraya de Rabbi Zera. It was Rabbi Zera's friends who heard it, Rabbi Zera, Umanu, and who was it? It was Rabbi Abba, right? Who was it? Rabbi Zera, Rabbi Abba. So, Braid de Rabbi Chia bar Abba, who was the son of Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Hachi Amar, said like this. Rabbi Yochanan, that Amar Rabbi Yochanan said, Halach Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, but Treifa, the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel when it comes to Treifos, and the halachas are Rabbi Shimon when it comes to Be'evel, when it comes to Avelus. So halacha Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel betreifa. What are we talking about? Rabbi Shimon Gamliel halachas when it comes to treifa. Ha de Amran. That which we just said about the punctured intestines being sealed. That is Rabbi Shimon Gamliel's halacha, and the halacha follows him. Rabbi Shimon Be'evel, and as far as Rabbi Shimon is concerned, by Avelus is concerned, Mahi, what are we talking about? What is the halacha that is there? So we take a detour from Treifos to talk about Avelus for a few lines. Ditzanan, we learned in a Mishnah in Moed Katan, which is the Masechta that talks about Avelus. Kol Shlosha Yomim Harishonim, during the first 3 days of Avelus, Ba Mimakum Korov, if a relative arrives during the Shiva, in other words, he didn't know that he had a relative who passed away, right? All the brothers gathered together for Shiva. One brother they couldn't get in contact with. He lives within 1 day's journey of the area, and he arrives within 3 days of the beginning of Shiva. The halach is Mona Imahen. He joins their Shiva. He doesn't start from day one. He joins in, and then he's going to wind up with a couple of days less of Shiva. Right, he's just going to join into the Shiva that everybody else is following. Mimakom rachok, if, however, he lives far away and he hears about it, mona la'atzmo, then he's going to count his own Shiva. Right, you could wind up having a asynchronous Shiva. You could have somebody in the family that is doing Shiva at on 7 different days. If he lives a little bit further away and he gets the message a little bit late. Mikan ve'elach. After 3 days, afilu ba mimakom karov, even if he's coming from a close place, mona latzmo, he's going to count his own Shiva, right? Rabbi Shimon says, afilu ba yom hashvi, even if he arrives on day 7, ba mimakom karov, if he comes, this is the Rabbi Shimon that we're saying the halach is like. Rabbi Shimon says, even if he arrives on day 7, ba mimakom karov, as long as he lives in a nearby location, mona imahen, he counts with them, and that's the Shiva. She's just going to wind up keeping just that 1 day of Shiva, and that's it. So Amar man dehu, so some anonymous person, one of the students who heard this rule, says, Izki ve'esak, I hope that I will merit, and I will go up to Eretz Yisrael, so that I will be able to see, so I will be able to hear, ve'egmara lishmata mipume demara. I want to be able to hear directly from the source this halacha. I'd like to hear that. The Agmar Kisolik, he did, in fact, merit to go up to Eretz Yisrael. Ashkechel Rabbi Abba, braid Rabbi Chia bar Abba. He found Rabbi Abba, the son of Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Omar Lei, and he said to him, Amar Mar, did the master say halacha Rabbi Shimon Gamliel betrefa, that the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel when it comes to trefos? Amar Lei, and he said, he says, no, I said ain't halacha Amri. I said the halacha is not like him. They got it backwards. Okay. Rabbi Shimon be'avel, did you say that the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon when it comes to avelus, about this rule that even if the guy arrives on day 7? So, what about that? Amar Le, he said, plukten, and he says, that's a machlokas, actually. I didn't say the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon. I said it's a machlokas. De itmar, as it was learned in the base madrash, Rav Chisda, Amar Rav Chisda says, halacha, that the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon. The Chinam Rabbi Yochanan says halacha, the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon. For Rav Nachman are ema halacha, and Rav Nachman said it isn't. So it's a machlokas about it. Ve'ein halacha Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel betrefa. The halacha is not like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel when it comes to the trefos. Therefore, if you find a hole in the intestines gets plugged up, it is not acceptable. Ve'halacha Rabbi Shimon be'evel. But the halacha does indeed follow Rabbi Shimon when it comes to the avelus rule. Damar Shmuel halacha divrei mekel be'evel, because there's a rule that Shmuel says the halacha is always like the lenient opinion when it comes to avelus. So, therefore, that's a general rule that we have. Avelus is a lenient area of halacha. We're always going to follow the lenient view. Amar Reb Shimi bar Chia. Reb Shimi bar Chia says, "Makifim bebnei ma'ayim." So, what we do is, if we've got a hole in intestines and we want to be able to check if that hole occurred before or after. That come after whether the hole was punctured after the shechita or before. If it punctured before, then it's a treifa. If it punctured afterwards, it's not. So what do we do? So makifim b'bnei mayim, we can make a hole at another location in the intestines and compare the two. So if they look the same, then you know the hole occurred after the shechita, and then the animal is okay. Hadhu b'nei ma'ayim, there was once a case where they had intestines, da'asu l'kami de Rava, that they brought before Rava. Akfinhu, he made a puncture, and he took a look, velo idmu, and they did not look the same. So therefore he was going to say that it's going to be a treifa. Also Rav Misharshia, Rav Misharshia, his son came along, Mimashmesh Behu, and he started to, manipulate the intestines a little bit, and then V'idamu, and then the hole looked the same. So wow, so there it is. The animal's not treifa, it just needed to be handled a little bit. So Amar Lei, so he says, Minolacha, he said, how did you figure out to do that? That was a great, clever trick. So Amar Lei, so he said, Kamo Yedei Mashmashu Bahani. He says, I've just figured how many people have been handling these intestines. Probably a bunch of rabbis have been looking at these intestines to figure out whether they're fine or not. So I figured, Mekami Delesa Lekami Demar, before you even saw it. So therefore I figured I got to have, manipulate these intestines as well, this hole, so that it looks the same at the end of the day. So Amar Lei, so he said to him, Chakim, my son is so smart, but Trefos, ki Rabbi Yochanan, like Rabbi Yochanan. So the halacha, we don't follow this nowadays. We don't do this comparison, even though it seems like Gemara comes out as a conclusion that it's fine. We're machmir not to do it because we just don't see ourselves as expert enough to do this in practice. So we stay away from all the holes. Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Elazar, they both say makifin bereya. We do make punctures in order to compare two holes in the lungs. Amar Rava says, Lo amran ella be'osa aruga. That is as long as you're on the same side, the same row of lobes, right? We said that there are several lobes on one side and several lobes on the other. You got to be on the same side. Aval aruga la aruga lo. But you can't compare one side to the other. I guess the different sides of the lungs have different appearances, so therefore you can't compare. The hilchas of the halacha though is afilu me'aruga la'aruga. You can compare from one row of lobes to the other. Midaka ledaka, migasa legasa, but you can compare two different explanations that I saw on explaining this line. It could mean from a small animal to another lung of a small animal, or we mean that is from one of the lobes rather than from the lower. We said like they had the larger lobe on the bottom, and then 3 smaller lobes on one side and 2 smaller on the other side. You can't compare the larger structures to the smaller structures of a lo migasa ledaka, but you can't go from the large structures to the small structures. Lo midaka legasa, not from the bottom to not from the higher from the smaller structures to the larger structures. You can't go compare it to different locations on the lung. I think that's what it means. But I did see somebody else translate it as that it was from different types of animals, but I'm not sure about that. He says this is Rashi is the right. Rashi is the one who brings. Has another viewpoint. He brings it as comparison from one animal to the next. Right. It's interesting because then you're actually comparing a lung from one animal to a lung of another animal, and that's okay as long as it's not the lung of an ox to a lung of a sheep, and that's why it's an interesting opinion. Abaye and Rava, both of them said makifim bekaneh. If you've got a puncture in the trachea, so then you can make a puncture and compare it. Amar Rav Papa lo amran ella be'osa chulia. If you do that, it has to be in the same section, right? In the same within the same 3 rings, because we said that the trachea is made up of the different rings of amechulia lechulia lo, but you can't bring it from like one section of the trachea to the other. The different sections will look differently. So the halacha is afilu mechulia lechulia. You can even bring it from outside of one group of 3 to another group of 3. Umi bar chulia lebar chulia, and also we can also bring it from the areas that are to the next to the bar chulia, like means the son of the rings, which means that it's the area next to the area of the trachea, but not mechulia lebar chulia v'lo mebar chulia chulia. But you're not allowed to compare those 2 areas that have different rules. The chulia and the bar chulia is basically the chulia is the lower section of the trachea, which is surrounded by cartilage, and the bar chulia is the upper section of the trachea, which is only partially surrounded by cartilage and has the meat on top. The punctures will look different from the different sections.
Our scroll has a nice picture on the article.
So our scrolls rely on the pictures of the art scroll. There you go. Amar Ziri says, Chalcholes. The chalcholes is the rectum area of the last. That's the last part of the digestive system before the waste leaves the body of the animal. Shenikva, if it gets a hole in it, kshera, it's still kosher. Why? Hol virechaim mamidososa. That back section area is surrounded by the bones of the hips of the animal. So therefore, even if the skin of the rectum is actually not there, it's still a tube because the hip bones are still holding everything in place. So it's doesn't really affect the animal much if there's any of that part missing. V'kama, how much of the rectum area can be missing? Amar Rabbi Eloi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yochanan, Makom hadavak berubo. If we're talking about the area where it is being held together by the hip bone area, so then even if the majority is missing, you could still be kosher. Shelo b'makom hadevek, but if it's not the area where the hip bones are holding it together, so then b'mashu, even the slightest amount that's missing is a treifa, because then the waste is going to get into the body of the animal, and it's not going to last. Amru Rabbanan Kami the Rabbanan said before Rabba Mishmei the Rav Nachman and Rabbi Nachman, Amar Lav mi amina lechu lo tislube. Right? Didn't I say to you that you're not supposed to hang on you're not supposed to hang you're not supposed to hang on Rav Nachman Boki Sriki, empty pitchers. Basically, don't quote in the name of Rav Nachman things that he didn't say. Right? They're saying that this is what Rav Nachman said. Don't hang empty pitchers on Rav Nachman. Hachiyam Rav Nachman. This is what Rav Nachman really said. Makom hadavik, if you've got the area where the hips keep it in line, afilu nito kulo, even if the entire thing is missing and the entire rectum is missing, it's still fine because it's still going to be a narrow area and it's still going to be fine. That's kosher. Hu shenishtayir bo kedei tefisa, as long as there is 1 finger breadth's worth of flesh that's still there. The kama amar Abaye Kamilo batida, right? It's the amount is the 1 finger breadth. Betorah when it comes to an ox. So that's all that's necessary. Hakeres hapnimis, the inner stomach of the animal. This is the inner area. This is the Mesum? The omesum area?
Paunch.
The paunch. Okay, the paunch. So the paunch is the first stomach that that it swallows the grass into when it swallows. So Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, Rabbi Yehuda says, and so if that gets punctured, then that's a treifa. So Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Rav, Heyed Nosan Bar Shila Reish Tavachaya. Rabbi Nosan Bar Shila, who was the head of the butchers, he would know Tzipori Lifnei Rebbe, and then in front of Rebbe, Mushum Rabbi Nosan, because of Rabbi Nosan says, Ezo he cares pnimis. What is this inner paunch? Sanya dive. He says it is the place that the wolves hate, meaning that if you throw the meat to the wolves will eat it. This area is disgusting from the stomach. That area the wolves will not eat. That's the inner paunch area.
Even though it's meat?
Even though it's meat, they don't want it because it's too much digestive juices and things in there, and it's gross. They won't touch it. V'chein amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha. Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha says also Sanya divi. It's the area that the wolves won't touch. Rabbi Yishmael says Istumcha de Karsa, that it means it's the place that's called the Istumcha de Karsa. Rashi says Istumcha. He says I heard it's the Istomica, which sounds like the word stomach. Yeah. So okay, but Rashi says I don't know what it is. So we'll go with that. So Ravasi Amar, that's opinion number 2. There's going to be like 7 opinions. Ravasi says, I'll tell you what it is. Rabbi Yochanan, he says it's Rabbi Yochanan says, Mokum Tsar Yesh Bekeres, there's a narrow area in this paunch. Ve'eni Yodeh Ezu, but I don't know where that is. So Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says, Nafal Kreisa Babera, great. This stomach has now fallen into a pit. There's no way we can rely on any kosher place. If you don't know where the non-kosher place is, then how are we supposed to know what the kosher place is? So therefore, that's not helpful. So Amar Rav Acha, Breid Rav Ava, Amar Ravasi. So Rav Acha Bar Ava, Rav Ava says in the name of Ravasi, Min ha-meitzar ulamata. The narrowing part is you get to the front of the cow and the rib cage narrows in. That area which is in the rib cage, in that narrow area, that's the inner paunch. The inner paunch because it goes into the rib cage. So it's from there downward. Why we call it downward? Because when they would slaughter the animals, when they would hang them up by their back legs. So from the down towards the front of the animal. Rabbi Yaakov Bar Nachmani Amar Shmuel. Rabbi Yaakov Bar Nachmani says in the name of Shmuel, Makom she'ein bo melas. It's the place that doesn't have any of the melas. The melas is a woolly substance which is on the inside of the stomach. I guess it helps the digestion or whatever, or maybe it secretes, but whatever it is, there's some kind of like a hair or whatever that's on the inside of the stomach. And the area that doesn't have that, which is the top area of the paunch, that area is the inner paunch. Rabbi Yaakov Bar Nachmani, Amar Shmuel. Rabbi Yaakov Bar Nachmani says in the name of Shmuel, I just said that one. Rabbi Avina, Amar Ravina says, Amar Geniva, in the name of Gvina, Mishmei de Rav, in the name of Rav, Tefach beveshet samach lekeres. It is the tefach of the esophagus, which is closest to the stomach. So you have to go out. That's zuhi karas pnimis. That is the inner paunch. Amri ben Marav, they said in Eretz Yisrael, Mishmei de Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, in the name of Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, Kol HaKeres Kulo, the entire paunch, Zui Keres HaPnimis. That is, the whole thing is the Keres HaPnimis. Ve'ezu Keres HaChitzon. So if that's the case, then what's the outer paunch? That you don't have to worry about punctures. So that is Basar HaChofas Rov HaKeres. It's not even the paunch itself. It's the abdominal wall, the very bottom of the animal that covers this paunch. That's what we're talking about. Rabba Bar Rav Huna says, Mifrata, it's the Mifrata. So my Mifrata, what is a Mifrata? So it's this exposed section. So Amar Rav Avia explains, Heicha de Pari Tabchi. When the butchers hang the animal up and they slit the stomach open in order to begin the process of removing the internal organs, the exposed stomach right there, right when you slit it open, that's the Mafrata. That's the part that's called the inner paunch.
After they're dead, I hope.
Yes, after they're dead. Yeah. So Bernardoi of the Karabba Bar Rav Huna. In Nardoi, they followed this opinion of Rabbi Bar Rav Huna that it was the Mafrata, this exposed stomach. So Amar le Rav Ashi la Meimar. So Rav Ashi says to Meimar, Kol Hanishmat. So what do you do with all the other opinions? We had all these other opinions, and you just decided to follow this one opinion out of all of them. So Amar le. So he said to him, Kulu Shaykhan bid Rabbi Bar Rav Huna. He says that's because the inner paunch, according to this opinion of Rabbi Bar Rav Huna, is large enough that it contains all of the other opinions within it, right? If you're going to think it's the narrower part that goes to the front or the little front area that's next to the esophagus, all of that is part of this exposed part of the paunch. Therefore, this is like the opinion that it contains all the other opinions. So, okay, but Ravasi, Amar Rav Yochanan, what was it that Ravasi said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that the keres hapnimis, this inner paunch, is the narrow place he didn't know what it is. So what are you going to do about his opinion, Mai? So Amar Lei, so he said to him, Kvar Pirsha Rav Achar Bar Ava. Rav Achar Bar Ava explained that was already the narrowing section that he was talking about, the narrowing section that went into the rib cage, and that is included in this shita, so we're fine. Okay, what about Rabbi Avina, the Merava? What are you going to do with Rabbi Avina's opinion that he says that it's the last tefach next to the esophagus? That certainly isn't included in your stomach that's getting exposed. So relay, honey vadai pligi. He says, you're right, that definitely there's one shita that doesn't agree, but at least we encompassed all the other shitas by following this opinion. Rabbi Yehuda says, B'gedola, when it comes to how much of this stomach has to get torn open in order for it to be a treifa. So we said that Rabbi Yehuda says by a large animal, a tefach, and a small animal, just the majority of it. So Amar Rabbi Binyamin Bar Yefes, Amar Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Binyamin Bar Yefes is named Rabbi Elazar. Lo gedola mamish. When we say a large, we don't mean that all large animals. We don't mean all oxen. And when we say ketana, lo ketana mamish, when we say a small animal, we're not talking about literally a small animal. Ella kol shenikra batefach velo havi ruba. What we mean to say is, whatever the animal is, doesn't matter the type of animal it is, if the opening is a tefach in size and it doesn't make it to the majority, zuhi sheshanu bigdola tefach. That is a large animal, and a tefach is going to make it a treifa. Look at this large, rip that large. That's already large. And ruba lohavi tefach. If you have a smaller animal and you tear it, and the size of the tear is not a tefach, but it is most of the stomach area, zuhi sheshanu b'ketana beruba. That's what we mean, a smaller animal, and once it has the majority, so it's torn open. So lo avi tefach pshita. So he says, so ruba lo avi tefach pshita. So if it's the majority and it's not a tefach, of course that is going to ruin it. Why? Because Rashi says we have a concept of ruba kekula, that whenever we have a majority of something, we say it's like the entire thing. So if it's like the entire stomach is split open, so then if it's the majority, of course it's going to be a treifa, even if it doesn't have a tefach. No, lo tzricha. I tell you, it does make sense that we have to say it because dehavia tefach b'mashu. What if you have a circumstance that the animal's stomach is torn in the majority, right? It's a small animal, so the majority is torn, and you're this close to a tefach. So you might think, okay, if you're that close to a tefach, you've got to get to the tefach in order to ma'udatim. What would you think? Ad demikra tefach. You might think to get the tefach, and that would ruin it. That would make it treifa. So until you get to that ad demikra tefach lo havi treifa, it's not a treifa. Kamash melansa, no. The answer is once you get to the majority, it's going to be a treifa. Amar Gniva Amar Rabbi Asi. So Gniva said in the name of Rav Asi, Nikdera Kesela treifa. He holds that this outer paunch area, right now we're going to talk about the outer paunch area. So the inner paunch, we just had discussion how much. The outer paunch area, so if it becomes punctured, and the size is a coin called a sella, right? It was a large enough coin. So if that is the size of the puncture, she'im timatech tamod al tefach. Why that size? Because if you took the circumference of the coin of a sella and you extended it outward, it would be a tefach. So basically, right, that means the diameter of the sella coin is one third of a tefach. How do you know that? Because the circumference of a circle is approximately 1/3, right? Because it's 2 pi r, right? That's the circumference, right? 2 r is equal to the diameter, right? Two times the radius is the diameter, right? So two times radius is the diameter. So diameter times pi is your circumference, right? So diameter times pi is your circumference. So therefore pi is 3.1417, whatever it is, right? So somebody at home is going to type the whole thing in. That's fine. I can look it up myself. Don't bother. So, but it's approximately rounded down to 3. So therefore, it's approximately, if you've got something that is a circumference of a tefach, that means the diameter is approximately 3, 1/3. Okay, so now, Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba says, Ledidi mefar shali mimine gniva. It was explained to me in the name of Gniva, Amabra dinardai, on the bridge that was going into Nardai, Kesela kshera, that if it was a sela, the hole, then it was still kosher. Yaser misela treif, it has to be more than a sela, slightly more than a sela. Kama yaser mi kesela, how much more than a sela? So Amar Rav Yosef says, Kegon da ailon tlos kashaisa betzipa beduchka. He says that if you've got 3 date pits, and if it still has some of the date fruit on the date pits, they're not like wiped completely clean, then you can push it through with a little bit of force. Then that's the size. Below tzipa, if they're clean pits, there's nothing on them, beravcha, then they just slide right in. So that's the amount of a hole. Right? They use common measurements, right? They didn't measure things in centimeters or whatever. They measured them by how many date pits you could fit through. Hemseis ubesakosos. Next part is the hemseis, the next part of the stomach, and the reticulum and besakosos. These others, we said that when it comes to those, that if the puncture is facing outwards, then that's a problem. If they're facing inwards, it's not a problem because they connect anyway. So they, anything that passes back and forth between the 2 stomachs, they're supposed to pass between them. Tanur Rabbanan rabbis learn. Machat, back to needles. This needle was found in the thickness of the walls of the beis hakosos, the reticulum area. Mitzad echad kshera. If it's punctured only on one side, does not go all the way through, so then it's kosher. Mishnei tzadim, if it punctures all the way through, so then it is a treifa. Nimtza aleha koret dam. If on the needle you find blood on it, so then biyadua, Randun Aleph and Aleph, biyadua shalifnei shchita, then you know that the puncture happened before shchita, because I guess the blood is still circulating before shchita, so therefore if it punctures, you're going to get blood on the needle. If the needle is in the stomach and it is clean, so that means that it punctured the stomach after the shchita. Lo nimtza leha koret dam, if there's no blood on it, b'yadush la'achar shchita, then we know that it happened and the puncture happened after the shchita, and therefore it is not a treifa. Higlid pi hamaka, if the wound forms a scab over it, b'yadua sheshlosh yamim kodim shchita, then you know that the wound happened 3 days before the shchita. The scab is not going to consider to be a blockage that heals it. As we said, once it's got a hole, it's a treif already. But this at least tells us that it was there for a while. Lo higlid pi hamaka, if the scab is not over it, hamotzi mechavero alavaraya, then the one who wants to take money must prove it. Now, what's going on here? So what we're suggesting is, let's say I'm a butcher and I buy an animal, and now I shecht it, and I open it up, and I find that it's got a hole in the stomach, and it has a scab on it. Well, I only bought this animal yesterday. If it had a scab on it, it means that this animal had a hole in its stomach 3 days ago.
You should take it to a vet to make sure it's okay.
You can't, because vets are not going to do internal are not going to be able to check the stomach internally. You can only check an internal stomach by opening up the animal. That's not part of a vet's job. Right? So in any event, this will then tell us that this butcher can go back to the guy who sold him the animal, me a treifa, and I want my money back. Which is very fascinating. It means that even the guy who's selling might not even have been aware. He couldn't have been aware that he was selling a treifa. Nevertheless, he has to take it back.
Really?
Yeah, he has to take it back. So this has practical halachic ramifications. Let's say, for example, in Toronto, you want to go esrog shopping, right? Yeah. So you go to the store, you look at your esrog, and in some small towns areas, right, that then you buy your lulav and esrog. They used to do it this way, right? You buy your lulav and esrog, and then you would show up, and they would say, "Here's your esrog. It's in the box, right?" And that was it. Your esrog was the one that had your name on it, that you bought it.
Were you allowed to look at the esrog to make sure there's no?
Well, so that's the thing. So if you open it up and you look and you see that your esrog's not kosher, even though once the box, he sold you a bad esrog, so you have to go back and get your money back, right? Even though the seller might not even be aware. He just took the box, right? He got the shipment in. He didn't even open the boxes. He's just transferring it over to you. You have the right to get your money back because
got another one.
Yeah, anything that's sealed, even if the seller isn't aware, he's responsible for guaranteeing the value of the goods that he's selling.
So can he go back to the person who gave him the esrog?
So he probably could, but when it comes to the treifa, maybe not, because then the Gemara goes on and says, right, if the butcher bought it from the farmer and the farmer bought it from the other, right, this guy's the rancher, right, and the rancher bought it from the farm from the breeder, right, well, he might not be able to go back to the breeder because he can only prove that this treifa happened within the last 3 days, and he might have bought it a month ago. You can't tell me that you can't prove. If you want to get your money back from me, you got to prove that there was a hole in the stomach a month ago. Well, I can't prove that because how are you going to prove it? So all the Gemara is telling us is if you've got a scab on it, then you've got proof that there's at least a 3-day hole here. But after that, all bets are off. Can't. Why is it that we've had all of these holes in all of these organs that we've been discussing, and we've had needles in them before? Or it's not needles, but we've had holes in all the organs before, and we have all of a sudden we've decided that we have to be able to find blood on the stomach. We've never discussed this before, right? Why is this? Even if there's no blood there, we said it's still a treifa. So the answer is hasam leka midi lemesrach. There's no item, right, that's going to catch the blood on it. Right, the meat obviously is going to have all whatever blood and whatever's on it in any event. So therefore, you need to have some item where the blood is on it. So here, there's a needle. So im isa dekodim shchitahu. If this needle was before shchita, so then meisrich havasarich, then the blood would stick to it, and that's how you would be able to know. But usually, when we're talking about just finding a hole in an organ, there's nothing for the blood to land on. We wouldn't know, right? So this is why it's different here. Amar Rav Safra Labai. Rav Safra says to Abaye, "Chazei mar haitzur b'merabanan de osmer ma'arava." So, have you seen this thing that this young scholar had said, who came from Eretz Yisrael? V'amar Rav Avira Shemani, and he shows up and he said, "My name is Rav Avira. Have you heard of this guy? Have you seen this guy, Rav Avira?" Right? Which is, he call himself Rav, right? He's calling himself Rav. Maybe he called attention to himself by calling himself Rabbi, right? Question of whether you should use your title Rabbi when you call yourself, when you announce yourself or not. Whether that's taking an honor. And the answer is that if people know you that way, then you can.
You can say Rabbi Mori.
Yeah, so you could say, well, we're talking about the person himself, right? So when I call people up, right? So sometimes I'll say to people on the phone, especially rabbis, I'll introduce myself by my first name, but when I'm around my students, right, Rabbi so and so, because that's how I'm known. So, right, in line with this. V'amar Maisa, he said, Uba lifnei Rebbe. He told the story of something that happened. There was a case of a stomach that came before Rebbe. There was a needle that was in the reticulum only on one side. Vitarfani made it treifa. So Abaye is intrigued by the story because that shouldn't be the case. So Sholach lei. So Abaye sent for Rav Avira. I want to see you. Now I'm not exactly sure I understand exactly what's going on in the story. Lo asa legabe. He refused to come. He didn't want to. Right, so Azahu legabe. So he went to him. Abaye went to go find him. Havakoy aigra. So he was there on the roof. Amar nechus marvanese. So he said, "Come on down here. I want to talk to you." Lo nachis. He did not come down. Again, like I said, I haven't seen any explanation except for the behavior. But solakhu legabe. Abaye went to go to him. Amarle, so he said to him, "Ema ligufa deuvda hechiava." Tell me the whole story about this reticulum that got punctured only on one side, and they said it was treifa. Amarle, so he said, "Mafter kinisiasona." He says, "You know what my job is? My job is that I am the guy who is in charge of. I'm the administrator, right? I tell." The students to come into the base medrash, when to leave the base medrash, come in, come out. I guess it sounds like he's like the administrator, right? He's like telling everybody, like the whole monitor. So le'ela mi Rabbi Abba, right? And in Rabbi Rabba's yeshiva. Now this is interesting. Who's Rabbi Rabba here? So Rashi says is Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. This is a shocking thing because Abaye did not live near at the same time as Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi.
What would you call Rabbi Rabba? What would you call him that?
The great Rebbe, right? That's a Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. If it's Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Rav Avira was very old. extremely old, because he must have lived a long
The
time.
son of Ravira that still calls him Ravira.
Well, he's saying he was the one who he heard this story in the yeshiva of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. So now he's talking to Abaye, so it had to be the same guy. The Hava Rav Huna Tzipora. So Rav Huna from Tzipora was there. Rav Yossi Mada and Rav Yossi from Mead was there. Yoshvin Lefanav, they were sitting before Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. Ubas Lifnei Rebbe, and before Rabbi Yehuda Nasi came this case. Machat Shimtzis Be'ovi Beis HaKosos Mitzad Echad, that there was a needle in the stomach from one side. And he's looking at it, and what does he do? V'havcha Rebbe turned it inside out, umatza aleh koret dam, and he found blood opposite where the needle was on the first side. So Rebbe said, "Im ein shamaka, if there wasn't a hole all the way through, koret dam minayin, where did the blood come from?" So he deduced that there must have been a hole all the way through. Well, if that's the case, then we're not really dealing with what we thought we were. We thought we were dealing with a case where it was only punctured on one side. It's not. He determined that it was punctured all the way through. So Amar Lei, so Abaye says to Ravira, Tarach Tariach Lahu Gavra, you made me work so hard, and in order to be able to find out the halacha, Mas Nisan, at the end of the day, this is just a regular Mishnah halacha. That this is the case of a reticulum or the stomach that has a puncture that goes towards the outside. It's a treifa. I mean, that's what Rebbe. All it was Rebbe was clever and figured it out that it was in fact punctured all the way through, and says nothing. Nothing. So I guess the point of this shiur is, I don't know what Rav Avira was going for, but Abaye was that interested in finding out the halacha that he was going all over the place trying to get the answer to this. Okay. Next case in the Mishnah, we still are on our first Mishnah of the Perek, right?
Wow.
Right, if you remember this first Mishnah, this long Mishnah. Nafla minagag, the animal falls off the roof. So Rav Huna says, Hiniach behema lemala uba'u matzo lemata. If you leave your animal alone and it's up on the roof, okay, and then you come home and the animal is on the ground, ein choshesh mishum risukei avarim. You don't have to worry that it fell off and it concussed its limbs. It must have climbed down. You can presume it climbed down safely.
Maybe if you had sharp claws for support.
So there are videos, if you ever watch a mountain goat climb, they can climb like almost directly vertical surfaces. It's insane what they're able to do. Yeah. So therefore, you know that if your animal was on the roof and then you find it on the ground, the animal got down safely. You don't have to say it. How could it have gotten down? It was straight down. No, it figured it out. Hahu gadya. There was a sheep, Dehava Leila Ravina, that Ravina had, Dechaza Chushla Beipuma, it saw some peeled barley inside the house, and it got excited. And Dagar Nafal Me'igra La'ara. It jumped and fell through the skylight down onto the floor below. So Asua Lekame Ravashi. So they brought this case to Ravina, and Ravina brought to Ravashi. Amar Le, Ravina said to him, Hadam Rav Huna, that which Rav Huna said, Hiniach behema lamalo balamatza lamate and chosh mishum risuke avarim. That which we said, that if you leave your animal on the roof and then you find it on the floor, it probably climbed down safely. Mishum de islay midi del misrach, because there's a wall there. So it figured out a way to climb. I know it was vertical, but it figured out a way to climb down. V'hai, this was a skylight. Skylights are a hole in the middle of the roof. Yeah. There's no way for it to get down other than falling straight down. So therefore, should I be presuming that it has concussed limbs and I can't eat it until I wait 24 hours or so? O dilma mishum de'amda nafsha, or do we say that, look, these animals, they know their limits. It wouldn't have jumped in a way if it had thought that it was going to injure itself. Mm-hmm. Therefore, the fact that it jumped from the second floor to the first floor means it knew that it was going to be fine. Mm-hmm. This one figured out it's going to be okay, and therefore it's fine.
Until you hear a crack.
Until you hear a crack. If you know that there's a bone broken, then you're right, it's different. Amar Le, Ravashi says, Mishum de amda nafsha. No, you can presume these animals, they know their limits, and therefore, if it jumped, you can presume it's okay. V'hainami amda nafsha. Hahi im rosa dehava beit rav chaviva. There was once a sheep, a lamb, that was by the yeshiva of Rav Chaviva, or the house of Rav Chaviva, Davu Shadron Kar'e Basraisa, that it was dragging its legs behind it. Not a healthy looking, it's like zombie lamb, right? It's like going along, just dragging its hind legs behind. So they thought it's a treifa because maybe it's got some kind of nerve damage or something that it's. So Amar Rav Yemer says, Hai Shigrona Nakte. We only have to say that it's probably some kind of a cramp, right? That's what Rashi calls it, cramp, right? This is that's the actual word he uses, right? That where is it? Yeah, Shigrona. He says krampa. Right, it says like a cramp. Right, it says a krampa. So he says this is like the animal's got some kind of a problem with its back legs. It's not a treifa issue at this point. It's got some other issue with its legs that it's dragging. So maskif lo Ravina. So Ravina asked him, how do you know that? Maybe it's got a broken spinal column, and maybe it's paralyzed from the waist down. So, but kua. So when they shechted it, they opened it up. They found the Ravina was right, that there was nothing wrong with it. So afilu hachi, nevertheless, hilchus Rav Yemar, the halacha is like Rav Yemar that you can't rely on that. If you don't know what the wound is, you can't rely on that. It's fine. Shigrona shechiach chut hashidra lo shechiach. I'm sorry. That Ravina was correct. Ravina was right that it was in fact had a severed spinal column. Right? Even if though that is the case, the hilchos, so the halacha is like Rav Yemar, who said that you can follow the fact that it's a cramp. Why? Because that's more common. That's the more common injury. So you can presume that it was the more common injury, right? So a broken spinal column is less common. Amar Rav Huna says, Zecharim haminagchin zeseh. So you've got these rams, right? If it's in National Geographic, they go smash each other into their heads, right? So when they go smashing into each other, you don't have to worry that that's going to cause the concussed limbs. That's the poutine, right? So, concussed limbs. Afal gav demidvu v'kaimi, even though they look like they're in pain and they're stumbling around, that's there because why? Because Simra ba'amahu dinakat lahu, right? That's just the regular dizziness, I guess, that comes with getting smacked in the head.
It's concussion.
But it's not, because that's the way the animals are normally. That's,
if you have a concussion, you forget where you are. You can feel dizzy.
I don't know if sheep ever know where they are. Rams, they're not sure how much they know. But in any event, the point is that's their nature. That's the way they are. Yeah. So the fact that the rams do that is not going to cause any real damage, right? Inaful la'ara. But if one ram gets thrown to the ground, right, I suppose, right, that if it's budding and then it falls off a rock or when it falls down, then chayshinon, then you have to...
WWE against each other.
Right, exactly, right? So that's where we're going to see, basic bottom line is that a big element to this is that the animal has to land in a way that's unexpected for it to be injured. If it lands in an expected way, they protect themselves in the way that they land. Amar of Menashe, so Rav Menashe says, "Honey dichre de ganve genave." When thieves come in to steal your rams, so what do? So they take the lambs, they throw them over the wall. Right? They're trying to get them out of your pasture. And you got to get it over, so you got to take a sheep and toss it over the wall. So ein chushishim mishum risuk evarim. When they throw it over the wall and it lands on the other side, you don't have to worry about it being a treifa. My time, why is that? Because kishaduluhu, when they throw them over the wall, they throw them back hind legs first, intentionally, because the thieves need these animals to be able to walk so they can get away. Right? So they're careful to make sure not to injure the animals when they're throwing them over the wall. Ahadrinhu, however, if they hear the police siren go off, and now they don't want to get caught, so they throw the sheep back over the wall. So now, then for sure you got to be worried, because that point when they're throwing them back over the wall, they don't care.
It might be too late because the cop may be seeing the person throw it back over the wall.
Yeah, well, I guess the siren, they hear it down the block. They're throwing them back over the wall. V'hani mili dehadrinhu machmas yira. That's only if they're trying to throw them back over the wall because they're afraid that they're about to get caught. Aval machmas tshuva. But if the guy now says, you know what, I want to do tshuva, so he comes and sneaks up at night and throws the sheep back over the wall. So then tshuva mariyasu, he's trying to do a good tshuva. He doesn't want the animals to get injured.
Sheep, then, if it's gonna
So he's gonna throw it back over the wall to return the sheep, and that's fine. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Marav. Rabbi Yehuda says in Marav, Hika al Rosha. If he hits he's trying to keep his animals in line, and he gets his like his shepherd's staff, right?
Like a whip or whatever.
Yeah, like a whip, but this is a stick. It's got to be a stick because the whip is going to be a potential other problem. And he hits it on the head. The hachala klape zanva, and the other end of the stick hits the tail of the animal, right? Al zanva v'hachala klape rosha, or the other way, he hits it on the tail, and it goes to the head. So keneged kol shedra kula. So the entire spine is now, right, because it's going along the entire length of the animal. So then ein choshim mishum risuke evarim. That's not going to cause a concussion to the animal because the blow is divided equally over the entire length of the spine. Ish sholem chutra apalge de gava. However, right, if part of the staff hits the middle of the back, then that's a different story. Then chayshinon isbe kitre. So we have to be worried about it now. And also, if there are knots in the stick, so that it will also produce a spot where it's hitting really hard, then chayshinon, we've got to worry about that. And ve'i machye apaske chayshinon. And if he hits it in the middle of the back, right, not straight down the side, but the animal is now facing sideways, he hits down the side of the animal, that's also going to be a problem.
So it's a club.
It's like a stick. It's like, they would, imagine like, you see the shepherds, they hold their staffs or whatever, right? So they could use them to whap the sheep that are going in the wrong direction and push them back in line, right? Amar Rav Nachman says, Beis harechem ein bo mishum risike yevarim. When an animal is born, the fact that it comes out of its mother through the birth canal, which is a tight space, that is not going to cause it concussed limbs, right? So you're allowed to shecht an animal the day it's born and eat it, right? It's only you're not allowed to do it for korban until the 8th day, but for just regular dinner, right, you can eat it. So Amar le Rava le Rav Nachman, Rava says to Rav Nachman, Tanya, we learn in a brayso de Mesayelach that supports you. Tinok ben yom echad, right? If you have a human baby that is 1 day old, mitame beziva, it is able to become tame with becoming a zav. What is a zav? So essentially a zav is a liquid that comes out of the private area for either men or women. Right? Women, it's blood, right? For men, it's a kind of liquid, but it's not reproductive fluid. It's some other type of fluid. This is like babies would be too young for that. So a baby, even if it has this fluid that comes out on the day it's born,
it can bring a baby.
No, that's spit up, right? This is it has to come out from its penis area. It's not coming out from its mouth area, right? So that's what makes it a ziva. Ve'isal daitach. Now, if you're going to think that yesh bo mishum risuke avarim, that being born is a concussive, traumatic injury type activity, so then ikre kan mibsaro machmas onso. Mibsaro velo machmas onso. Then we have a rule when we talk about zav. We'll discuss that when we get to I guess Maseches Krisos discuss it. So that if there is if a person has a reason why that liquid would have come out other than the fact that he's a zava, for example, he was in a traumatic injury, for example, or he ate extra, or he drank extra, or something like that, that may be the cause of it, then it's not a zav. Right? If there's something else you can depend it on. Now, if being born is a traumatic injury, then how can the infant on day one of the day it's born be a zava? Obviously, it's been through something traumatic. It was just born. So therefore, you see clearly that being born is not considered traumatic injury. No, because what are we dealing with here? This could have been a cesarean section, which is interesting. Everybody's always shocked and astonished that they were doing C-sections back in the times of the Gemara. There just wasn't any anesthetic. Yeah.
So the C-section was that much more painful than it is now.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Toshma.
Mothers.
So we'll try again to prove that that birth is not traumatic injury that would cause a treifa. Egel shenola b'yom tov. If you have a calf that's born on Yom Tov, So then Shochtin also be Yom Tov. You can shecht it and eat it on Yom Tov. It's not considered muktzah. Why? Huh?
Why didn't it be considered mutter?
Because it wasn't existent yesterday, right? The answer is because it was. Because you could have shechted the mother, and if you shechted the mother, you could have eaten the child as a part of the mother, right? The child, the offspring inside the animal doesn't need a separate shechita then. And so therefore, just because it's born doesn't mean it's not food anymore. So therefore, if it was food before Yom Tov, it got born, it's still food. So you can shecht it on Yom Tov and eat it. So therefore, the question is, how could you, the fact that you can shecht it and eat it shows that it's not a treifa on the day it's born. So hachanami, no, maybe his is different. And this could have also been a C-section. Tashma, come and listen. She'im nolad hu mumo imo shezeh min hamuchon. When it comes to a firstborn, right? Firstborn animals that are kosher have to be brought as korbanos to the Beis Hamikdash. If an animal has a blemish, his firstborn animal, then the Kohen gets to take it and eat it for himself. If this animal is born with a birth defect, right? So then, if it's born on Yom Tov with its birth defect, you can eat it right away. Why? Because if you would have shechted the mother, it wasn't born, it could have been eaten. Now that it's born with a birth defect, it could be eaten. So therefore, it was always acceptable to be eaten the entire time. So therefore, everyone agrees that if it was born with a wound, with a blemish on it, so then it is ready to be...
But wouldn't a wound or a blemish be some sort of sign for treifa?
No, because a blemish could be an ear missing. It could be, right? Treifa has to be much more severe, right? Those are not the same. And if you're going to say, okay, this is going to be the same thing, shiyotza derech dofan, that maybe this is also a cesarean section, can't be. Because derech dofan mikadosh, because this is a whole thing is a concern about an animal being born and whether it has the holiness of a firstborn or not. Well, firstborns don't apply to cesarean sections. Right. So therefore, if it was a cesarean section, the question wouldn't even come in. So therefore, this must be an animal that's born regular, normal, and yet you can still shecht it.
What happened if there was a problem with, when there's the firstborn, but there's a problem with the...
Then you do a cesarean section, but then it's not a bechor, and the Kohen can have it. It's not. It doesn't even go to the Kohen. It's not considered. It doesn't have to do firstborn. Now, the ha'amar Rabbi Yochanan, but didn't Rabbi Yochanan say Mordechai Rabbi Shimon le'inyan kodshim she'eno kadosh, right? That Rabbi Yochanan holds that with that as far as cesarean section, everyone agrees that it is not considered sanctified. So hachab ma'askina, what's going on here? Shehifris al gabe karka. You're right. Normally, a birth, it is a regular birth, but normally a birth is a traumatic incident. Nevertheless, we have said that when it comes to these concussed limbs, if the animal shows a sign that it isn't concussed, like it stands up or it walks, then you can go ahead and assume it's not a treifa. That's what happened here. The animal was born, and then it spread its legs out in order to try to get up, and then you know that it's not a treifa. The Amar Rav Nachman says, Beis ha mitbachayim ein bo mishum risuke evarim. If the animal gets tossed down when they are slaughtering the animal, right? You have to knock the animal over in order to be able to get on its side so you can do the shechita. Mm-hmm. That knocking it over when it falls on its side is not going to cause concussion to the animal. Hahu Torah, there was once a ox did nafal that fell v'ishtamakal geni chusei, and it made a mooing sound that showed that it was really just annoyed, right? So it sounded like it got hurt. Al Rav Yitzchak bar Shmuel bar Marta, Sir Rav Yitzchak bar Shmuel bar Marta came to the place where they were selling that ox's meat. Shakal mishufrei, he took from the best of that meat. Amru le'Rabbanan minal lachos, why he was showing them it's kosher, completely kosher, right? So they said to him, how do you know that? So Amar lahu, so he says, Hachi Amar Rav, this is what Rav said, Tziparnav noetz ad shemagia la'aretz. The rule is that when an animal is getting knocked over, it keeps its feet in the ground the whole time. Therefore, it doesn't really, like the fall is slight versus like if it lost its feet and flipped over. It's not like it flips over and the whole body cavity of the animal falls. Like it's slow and tilts over.
Like you fall nice behind down to slow down or whatever it is.
That's right. Okay, should we stop here?
Beautiful. Yeah.
Okay, great. We will stop here, pick up on our review of Rav tomorrow morning.
Whew. Oh yeah, beautiful. Is there even a meeting here tomorrow morning for Shabbos?
No, we're gonna go to,
Those who are interested will go to Kollel.
yeah, and then there's 8:30 to buy 2 for those who are also interested.
Yeah.
Places to be interested in. Right?